Why would a museum dedicated to a Hollywood legend, America's original cowboy hero, suddenly shut its doors? For good. Was it money troubles? A forgotten legacy? Or something far more shocking behind the scenes? The truth about the Roy Rogers Museum is more emotional and more dramatic than most fans ever imagined. Stick around, because what happened will change the way you remember the King of the Cowboys forever. It was once a place where legends came to life. A museum filled with the dust, leather, and echoes of the Wild West's golden age. The Roy Rogers Museum didn't just preserve history. It celebrated a way of life that once gripped a nation's imagination. But now, the lights are off. The doors are locked. The saddles, boots, and golden spurs that once drew visitors from around the world are scattered, auctioned off, boxed up, forgotten by time. What happened to this monument of Americana? Why would something so beloved just vanish? This isn't just the story of a museum closing. It's the unraveling of a legacy once thought unshakable. And the reason why may sting more than you expect. Long before the fame, before the spotlight, before anyone called him Roy, there was Leonard Franklin Sly, a boy born in a tent on a cold November day in 1911, right where Cincinnati's Riverfront Stadium would eventually rise. His beginnings were modest, even harsh. His father hated the drudgery of city life so fiercely that he and his brother built a houseboat from scraps, pushing out onto the Ohio River in search of a better life. That drifting home, held together by hope more than nails, eventually came to rest on land after the Great Flood of 1913. They never left it. That's where Leonard grew up, in a world of river fog, scarcity, and wild dreams. They settled on a little farm in Duck Run. There, young Leonard found his voice. He rode his first horse, a humble gift from his father, and yodeled with his mother across the fields like their own secret language. On Saturday nights, the family joined barn dances, where Leonard, barely more than a boy, sang, played the mandolin, and called out the rhythm as neighbors stomped and laughed into the night. It was his first taste of showmanship, and though life was tough, something inside him began to stir. Something bold, something unshakable. School never quite fit. He drifted between classrooms from McDermott back to Cincinnati, before eventually giving up altogether. Night classes failed too. The factory work left him too tired to learn. But that didn't mean he was done dreaming. If anything, he was just warming up. As the Great Depression spread like a shadow, Leonard looked west, where the sun always seemed to shine a little brighter. His sister had gone to California and he followed, crammed into a 1923 Dodge alongside his father. That first trip didn't stick. But months later, he returned on his own, picking peaches, hauling gravel, taking any job that would put a few coins in his pocket. He wasn't chasing fame yet. He was chasing survival. Then came a chance, a nudge from his sister. A radio show was holding auditions. Leonard hesitated. He was quiet, uncertain, but something told him to go. Wearing a Western shirt stitched by his sister, guitar in hand, he sang, he yodeled, and the crowd fell silent. He had them. That moment cracked the door open. He joined a local group called the Rocky Mountaineers. It was scrappy, unstable, always on the verge of falling apart. He bounced from band to band, learning, stumbling, but always circling back to the music. Then, in 1933, something clicked. He reunited with Bob Nolan and Tim Spencer, and together they formed a group that would change country music forever, the Sons of the Pioneers. Their sound was raw but pure. They rehearsed like men possessed. A year later, a radio announcer gave them a name that stuck, and the world began to listen. Tumbling Tumbleweeds and Cool Water weren't just songs, they were lifelines, floating across the radio waves into the hearts of a weary nation. Leonard's voice was becoming familiar, but what came next would turn him into a household name. In 1938, with Gene Autry tangled in a contract battle, Republic Pictures went searching for a new singing cowboy. Leonard auditioned and won. Just like that, he was reborn. Roy Rogers, they called him, a name carefully crafted to echo Will Rogers. And with it came a new identity, one that would forever change his life and Hollywood itself. Under Western Stars wasn't just a debut, it was a breakout. Roy galloped across Technicolor plains, charming audiences with his easy smile and clear moral compass. His horse, Trigger, wasn't just a co-star. He was family. Fans adored them both. Kids clutched Roy Rogers' lunchboxes, comics flew off shelves, and by the time television rolled around, Roy was everywhere, an omnipresent cowboy saint in white. But what made Roy different wasn't just the screen presence. It was what he did behind the scenes. He negotiated merchandise rights into his film contracts, a revolutionary move at the time. Toys, comics, hats, all bore his name, and all funneled into a fortune. He wasn't just playing a cowboy. He was building an empire. Alongside him stood Dale Evans, not just a co-star, but a partner in every sense. She brought strength, heart, and conviction. Together, they built more than a brand. They built a message. They opened their home to adopted children, championed causes close to their hearts, and shared their faith openly. After losing their daughter Robin, they transformed grief into grace, using their platform to advocate for children with disabilities. Their theme song, Happy Trails, wasn't a farewell. It was a promise. So when Roy opened the museum, it wasn't for vanity. It was a love letter to the fans, to the past, to the mythos he helped shape. A place where you could still hear the echo of hoofbeats and feel the warmth of a simpler, more heroic time. And yet, it's gone. So what really happened to the museum that once held the soul of the American West? The answer lies somewhere between fading fame, shifting culture, and a world that may have moved too fast to remember the man who once taught it how to slow down. What started as a heartfelt tribute quietly became a battle against time. Roy Rogers never imagined his legacy would someday need rescuing. When he opened the Roy Rogers Dale Evans Museum back in 1967, it wasn't just a place to showcase glittering awards and movie props. It was a thank you letter to the people who believed in him. And for decades, families made the dusty pilgrimage to Apple Valley, where stories came to life in glass cases, and every room whispered of a bygone era. They came to see Trigger, standing tall and frozen in motion, and Bullet nearby like he was still guarding the front porch. There was Nellie Bell, the trusty Jeep, and Roy's fringed costumes, his guitars, his six-shooters, all laid out like memories you could almost touch. The Rogers family, especially Roy's son Dusty, poured everything into keeping the flame alive. Dusty knew those halls like the back of his hand. He'd grown up with those artifacts, not just as museum pieces, but as memories of his father's laughter, stories, and sacrifice. When the museum was moved to Branson in 2003, there was hope it might breathe new life into the legacy. Branson seemed perfect, a town built on tradition, performances, and wholesome charm. For a while, it worked. Attendance ticked up, the exhibits shone brighter. But behind every corner loomed the same question. Can you make yesterday feel urgent today? Roy had always been practical, grounded by common sense and cowboy grit. Before his death, he made one thing clear. If the museum ever became a burden, it was okay to let go. He didn't want his dream to become a weight around the necks of the people he loved. And by 2009, that moment arrived. The Rogers family made the painful call. The museum would close. Its pieces, each one a thread in the tapestry of a legend, would be sent to auction. The news hit fans like a shot to the heart. The auction wasn't just a sale. It was a farewell tour. Trigger's saddle, Roy's guitar, the photographs, costumes, and handwritten letters. They were each a chapter of a story many had lived alongside. But even in heartbreak, there was reverence. At the final auction, as Dale's horse was sold and Trigger's stunt double found a new home, someone began to softly sing "Happy Trails." One by one, the crowd joined in. No microphones, no stage, just love. Patrick Gotch, the owner of RFD TV, stepped in to purchase Trigger, ensuring that at least one piece of Roy's soul would still be seen by the public. And slowly, quietly, the museum doors closed behind them. But that wasn't the end, because something unexpected happened next. Roy's story started showing up in places no one expected. DVD sales of his old westerns quietly soared. Streaming platforms began adding vintage shows, including The Roy Rogers Show, and suddenly a new generation was discovering what made him special. Cowboy hats reappeared at fan conventions, tributes popped up at state fairs, and the phrase "Happy Trails" echoed once again through retro festivals and reenactments. Even educators began to take notice. University courses on American media started using Roy as an early example of cultural branding. He wasn't just a performer. He was a pioneer of crossover appeal, mastering radio, film, and television long before it became standard. He created a universe that stretched from silver screen saloons to cereal boxes. In many ways, he was the original multimedia cowboy. But the legacy didn't just survive in pop culture. It bloomed in faith communities. Churches still played clips of Roy and Dale talking about values that rarely make headlines today: kindness, humility, belief in something bigger. Parents showed old episodes to their children not just for entertainment, but for the message underneath. Back in Apple Valley, the town that once cradled Roy's dreams, reminders still lingered. Street names, parks, annual tributes. The museum was gone, but it was as if the town itself had taken on the role of keeper. Locals remembered not just the star, but the man who gave back, who spoke gently, and who signed autographs with the same care he gave his family. And maybe that's what makes this story so powerful. The closing of the museum didn't erase Roy Rogers. It set him free. He no longer lived in glass displays and velvet ropes. He now lived in living rooms, in classroom lessons, in the strum of an old guitar. The trail may have faded in Branson, but the footprints remain. And as long as someone hums that familiar tune or tips their hat to a passing stranger, the spirit of Roy Rogers rides on. In the age of fast fame and fleeting relevance, Roy Rogers' story now feels like a guidepost. A reminder that some legends aren't just remembered. They are revived, one memory at a time. When the doors to the Roy Rogers Museum closed for the last time in late 2009, it wasn't just a building that shut down. It was a chapter of American identity that quietly took a bow. Dusty Rogers, his son, had fought against the tide with everything he had. Traveling exhibits, themed promotions, desperate efforts to connect a new generation to the values of the past. But the echoes just didn't carry like they used to. Then came the 2008 recession, slamming small-town tourism into the pavement. Maintenance bills ballooned. Climate control systems, artifact preservation, taxidermy upkeep for the animals Roy had loved. Costs that once made sense now stacked against dwindling ticket sales. The museum bled money, and Dusty knew what his father had always warned. If the mission could no longer sustain itself with integrity, let it go. The heartbreak wasn't in the closing. It was in accepting that it was the right thing to do. The 2010 Christie's auction transformed that sorrow into something unforgettable. A final gathering of those who grew up believing in the mythic cowboy, who still believed good guys wore white hats. More than 300 items, each one carrying a piece of Roy and Dale's soul. The most emotional tug of all? Trigger. That golden Palomino, forever frozen in Gallup, sold for $266,500 to RFD TV founder Patrick Gotch, who didn't stash him away in a vault. He gave Trigger a new home where the public could still visit. The same went for Bullet the dog, for Buttermilk, for Nellie Bell the Jeep, characters in a living, breathing Western that never really ended. As the last gavel fell, someone began to hum Happy Trails. One voice turned into a wave. Hundreds joined in. It was raw, unrehearsed, and it was perfect. That impromptu chorus wasn't about Roy's passing. It was a pledge to carry forward what he stood for: faith, loyalty, family, and perseverance. The museum was gone, but something deeper had taken root. News outlets from coast to coast asked the same question: how do you hold on to legacy in a world that rewards whatever's new and now? Nostalgia, once treated like a weakness, was being redefined as cultural stewardship. People didn't just want to remember Roy. They wanted to reintroduce him to a world that had lost its moral compass. While Twitter trended with flash-in-the-pan controversies, people were quietly watching Roy's black-and-white reruns on late-night cable and streaming services. And here's where the story takes an unexpected turn. Roy Rogers, long dismissed as just a singing cowboy, began to be re-examined through a modern lens. Academic circles and film historians now call him one of the earliest architects of American storytelling. Not a punchline, but a blueprint. His media empire wasn't just about licensing, it was about values. Before Buzz Lightyear ever made it onto a shelf, Roy was on thermoses, comic books, and lunchboxes. Yet he never sold out. He refused to lend his name to products that didn't align with his code. Integrity was his brand, and that's what made it valuable. What's equally fascinating is how Roy lived off-screen. Unlike today's stars who flaunt private islands and designer jets, Roy and Dale invested in causes and communities. Still, they enjoyed quiet luxury. Ranches in Apple Valley, classic Cadillacs and station wagons outfitted with saddlebags, custom-engraved wristwatches from Longines and Rolex, and even a family airplane Roy piloted himself. His wealth was never about flash, but functionality. Later in life, he was rumored to have multi-million-dollar insurance policies, covering not just health and life, but also the contents of the museum, staff, and charitable endowments. His investments? Smart, quiet, and legacy-driven. Partial ownership in television syndication companies, early stakes in Western-themed merchandising, and long-standing brand partnerships with toy manufacturers gave him an enduring revenue stream. While others gambled on short-term fame, Roy bet on trust. Financially, the lesson was clear: build wealth like you build a barn, slowly, with purpose, and strong enough to weather storms. In the years following the auction, fans created online communities that became digital campfires. Old photos resurfaced. Stories shared by fans who'd once met Roy or received a signed postcard from Dale gained thousands of shares. One boy with autism wrote a letter saying Roy's movies helped him understand kindness. That letter made national news. Apple Valley became more than a memory. It became a destination. A bronze statue of Roy on Trigger welcomed visitors. Schools taught his principles through classroom programs. Libraries hosted Roy Rogers reading hours. Children who'd never seen his films still learned his values. That kind of impact? It doesn't fade. It grows in unexpected ways. Even Hollywood came knocking again. Documentaries aired, exploring his role in shaping film archetypes. Dale's memoir, Angel Unaware, found new readers among advocacy groups. And in a moment that felt like destiny, a remastered collection of Roy's voice, his radio shows, his music, even his thoughts, was released for streaming. One interview struck a chord with everyone. When asked what he wanted fans to remember, Roy paused and said, "That I tried to do the right thing." That single line said more than any monument ever could. He didn't seek sainthood. He sought sincerity. In the noisy swirl of fame, that voice remains calm, clear, and trusted. And maybe that's why, even now when a kid hums Happy Trails or an old Western comes on, the legacy of Roy Rogers doesn't feel old-fashioned. It feels necessary, because sometimes doing the right thing is the boldest trail a cowboy can ride. And that's the wild, bittersweet tale of the Roy Rogers Museum, where cowboy legends met cold reality. Hit like, drop your thoughts below, and saddle up for more Hollywood history next time.